loving this. Oh no! Why? I'm so constantly with him that boy oh boy I better like him. Hello, so welcome to the vlog for new releases. I have 3 new releases that I'm going to be reading in this vlog. The first one is Brandon Sanderson's Secret Project, number 3. In this vlog, I'll be talking about it in the normal spoiler-free. I'm going to use the title, I'm going to use the show the cover, and talk about basic plot kind of stuff. If you don't want any of that information, if you just want to know did she like it, the answer is yes, she did. But that will be here, but there will be timestamps so you can skip around if you need to. Then I read, at this point that I'm filming the clip, I'm already done reading them. Then I read You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight, which is a YA slasher thriller. And then finally, The Will of Many. I'll take you through reading each of these books, and then at the end, I'll rate them according to how I liked them and do some final thoughts. So, enjoy the vlog. Halfway through, loving it. Oh man, I was a little bit nervous after the last Secret Project. Loving this. So Yumi and the Nightmare Painter, we have Yumi, who is in this very rigid society. She is one of the chosen, one of the few that gets to do this ceremonial thing where she stacks stones. She's able to speak with spirits and she's sort of like the bridge between humanity and spirits and helping them meet their needs, helping them to have their wishes granted, to be able to help them. And then we have Painter. I'll call him by his title because that's how the story starts. Painter, he lives in a world where there are these living, breathing nightmares that manifest into the world, and they're like these blobs of dripping black. They're nightmares. And it's his profession to handle them and protect the people, and the way he does that is through painting. So when he sees a nightmare, he can paint it into something else and kind of change its form and make it harmless. And these 2 different perspectives in these 2 different places end up converging and connecting in a really interesting way, and that kind of kicks everything off. I love it so far. This might be my favorite Sanderson setting yet. It's so focused around art. It's so artistic, the story itself, but also the setting, where they live, their professions, their passions, the things that connect them to the world and to the people in the world. Everything is so focused on art and on passion and on a sense of self and expression of that self. And it's just like, I'm a very settings driven character, and settings are rarely what connects me to Sanderson's work. This is by far, I think, my favorite setting of his. I feel it. And it's so visual, it's so engaging. This is such a different kind of setting and different kind of story for Sanderson. It has a very different feel than what he normally does, and I'm so into it. My one kind of nitpicky complaint early on is Sanderson loves his awkward humor. He thinks awkward situations are so funny, and he's leaning on it in this one big time. 2 inexperienced characters that are involved in each other's lives suddenly, unexpectedly, and forced into uncomfortable situations. Oh, the funny. A character doesn't understand the other character's culture and therefore fumbles over social norms and puts the other one in an awkward situation with his crush. So many laughs. I personally don't find awkward humor nearly as funny as Brandon does, and he's really leaning into it, at least in the first half of this book, but it's something that he leans into in other stories as well. He loves to lean into that with Shallan. I've never connected with this particular brand of his humor, but that's also never made me not like one of his books. It's just one of those things that's like, okay, yeah, I know you find that funny. But again, setting, characters, even the characters, the way they relate, the way their personal their personality traits and how connected that is, how anchored that is to the way they were raised, the culture, environment, and expectations they were raised in. Like Yumi is a very rigid personality, and that's largely to do with the very rigid, structured culture and society and expectations that she has been raised in, and Painter is far more emotions-led and impulsive. A lot of that is also wrapped up in his situational things, but then also their individual art forms are also tied to those personality characteristics in the world, and it just all feels so really nicely tied together, and I'm just really liking it. It's good. It's a really, really, really good start. Loving this. Please don't let me down. This book did more than I could have expected out of it. It was so fun. Oh my goodness. Romance, not Sanderson's strong suit, and not something that I really care to read. Yet, I wasn't fussed. Usually when a romance kind of takes over the plot of a fantasy story, I'm out. And romance was a really big factor in this. In fact, it was either in his acknowledgments or in his dedication that he dedicated this book. He acknowledged Emily, his wife, for encouraging him to put more romance in his books. And had I known that, I would have said, no, don't do that, because I don't think writing romance is one of the things that Sanderson does well. And yet, I'm not gonna say that I was head over heels with what was going on, but I wasn't mad about it. That's not like me. But Sanderson really pushed himself with this book. He really did something different with it, and I think he did really, really well with it. I think that the reveals near the end, the twists, were a lot, to the point that I felt like I need some help processing all this. And then the book helped me out. And it was like, I know you didn't understand that, let me explain. Which is kind of hilarious. But I think as far as tying in the themes with the characters, with the world, with their craft, it was done so well, and tying everything together and kind of subverting my expectations with how environmental this book was, with how much the setting mattered and how vivid it was done so well. I have one big complaint, and it's something to do with, it's one of the elements of the ending that I didn't like. At the time that this video goes live, the spoiler chat on my review channel is already up. So if you've read this book and you want to talk about it more than just spoiler free, if you want to dig into it, I have a spoiler talk on my review channel. The review channel is always linked in the description of my videos, so check that out. I haven't recorded that video yet. I'm recording this clip before I record that video, so I'm sure I'm going to talk about it. I'm positive I'm going to talk about it, but it'll be there. But I really, really enjoyed this book. I might have liked it more than Tress. I don't know. I need a second to process. Maybe I'll make that decision in the spoiler video whenever I record that, but I might have liked this video more. I mean, I might have liked this book more than Tress. But even with Tress being nautical, there was something about this one that was just really magical. I can definitely tell that Sanderson is having a good time. You can definitely tell that in Stormlight, in Mistborn, in even Mistborn Era 2, Sanderson's trying to do something bigger, and with these, he's trying to push himself creatively, he's trying to have a good time, he's trying to do stories that are smaller scope, but are still really, really imaginative. And while Secret Project 2 didn't work for me nearly as much as these two have been really, really good. And it's fun to see Sanderson do something different and just have these, I mean, he pitched these secret projects as something that he wrote in his spare time for the love of it. And that's exactly how they feel. They feel like a for the love of it passion project that aren't trying to be his epics, are just trying to be a drop of delight. And that's how they've been. It's been really good. So the next book, You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight, is a YA slasher. Our main character is Charity, and she's working at this summer camp or summer job that takes place on this acreage where people go to have a horror movie simulation happen to them, basically. There was this horror movie camp Camp at Mirror Lake, and it's your stereotypical slasher movie. And on this lot where the horror movie was filmed, this lot has now been bought, and now this this experience your own horror night simulation game happens. So Charity works at this summer, it's not a camp because it's you come in, you do the game, you leave. So this summer job where people come in for a night and they basically pay to get scared, and it's this whole act. You have this person who's playing the murderer, you have the people who are designated to die, they have sound effects, they have fake body parts, dismembered bits around, and they're playing a game, and some people win the game and survive, and some people, you know, die. So Charity, she's in charge. She's a teenager, but unfortunately this book does, I'm half done with it, I'm not done with it yet. Unfortunately this book does fall into the trope of there is no such thing as a responsible adult in the vicinity. Like we have an adult that comes onto the property shooting a shotgun, screaming at them, threatening them, and then a police officer shows up and he's like, she's harmless, and also, can you blame her for being mad? Y'all are doing weird stuff. Anyway, I'm gonna take her out for breakfast and then take her home. I don't care what you do. And like, the guy who runs this whole game just isn't present. He doesn't even check in on them. There's no cell phone reception here, so if they need something, he can't even take their call. Absent parents that couldn't care less about their kid. Like, again, I'm at the halfway point, so an adult could come on the scene, but at the moment, we're doing the kind of YA trope of this all works because nobody cares or is competent in the adult world, which I feel is definitely unnecessary. Like the camp counselor, or he's not a counselor, this isn't a camp. The guy who runs the game, who runs the program, he could be there. He could be a competent adult and he's just the first one to die. Or he could be a competent adult and he just like disappears and that's part of the mystery or something like that. You know, like everybody doesn't have to be incompetent. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This is actually quite good so far. There have been some, here, let me tell you how far I am. I finished chapter 10, so I'm actually over halfway done. This is only 230 pages long, so it's a really quick read, but there's already been some scenes that have been actually properly horrifying, some really grotesque, messed up stuff going on, you know, because as you might expect, some real killings do start happening, people disappear, there's actually stuff happening, and the scenes of horror are actually really, really good so far. It's only just now amping up. There was a lot of setup, so I'm only just now getting to like the true horror scenes, but so far, I'm really impressed with it. It is just a really quick slasher, so I'm not expecting something profound and amazing out of it, but just for a quick, messed up book, it's doing its job so far. Okay, I'm gonna start on some positive, because that would be the kind thing to do. So I finished You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight, and I would like to say that the protagonist of the story, Charity, she's smart, she's thoughtful, and she's loyal. She's not your typical horror damsel who just screams a lot and runs a lot and doesn't really think at all about anything. She is really thoughtful, actually. She's really clever, she's really smart, she knows the layout of this land really well, and she thinks through the decisions that she makes, but sometimes she still makes decisions. She's very brave, too. She's very brave. More brave than I would be in this situation, but she thinks through every situation, and sometimes she still goes into danger simply because her friends are in danger and she's not gonna leave them to die. So I really like her. She's very, very likable. She's very loyal, smart, brave, and generally a good protagonist to follow for this type of story. Now let's talk about all the rest of the things that I have to say about this book. Oh gosh, it had some really good... This is a tough one to talk about because there's so much good and there's so much bad. So I talked about it in the last clip. The scenes of horror in this book are phenomenal. Sometimes. It's a weird one to talk about because sometimes the horror is written horrifyingly. Like gruesome, these depictions of someone who's just been tortured and who's like holding their insides to get in so they won't go tumbling out. And it's like the way she writes it is gruesome, not, oh. But then there's other times where I can only describe it as Scooby-Doo. It's like a man in a monster mask chasing them down the hallway. That's not a specific thing that happened in this book, but if you've read the book, I'm sure you understand the simile. There are some pieces of this horror that felt so Scooby-Doo to me. It was derpy. It was goofy. Like, the way she would describe what was happening, it's like, this is supposed to be scary, but it's derpy. But there were authentically phenomenal moments of horror. There were also really great twists as far as like the whodunit, who's involved, and how it all came together. Some things were predictable, some things were not, and it was a great twist. And when I read the final chapter, I was ready to say, you know what? It has its flaws. I've got things to complain about, but I'm satisfied with that ending because it was a good ending. And this is one of those books that had a really good ending, and then it had an epilogue. And the epilogue decided to shoot itself and ruin the book. Oh no! Why? The final chapter was so good. It was shocking, it was unexpected, but it was just great for the story. It was satisfying, and it was so good. And then the epilogue happened. Oh man, what a good ending it could have had. But it didn't, so on to the next book. So I'm 200 pages into The Will of Many. The Will of the Many. This book is a new release, obviously that's the concept of the video, but everybody's talking about this book right now, so I'm gonna give you a pretty brief summary or idea of how it starts off, and then we'll kind of talk about it a little bit. So we follow a man who goes by the name of Viz. He is the son of a king of a conquered land, and in this new political setting, everybody has a will, and they have to surrender some of their will to the hierarchy, to those in charge. And Viz agrees, he agrees to go into this school setting, rise in the ranks, and accomplish what they want of him and surrender his will once he does what they want him to do. He tells them he's going to follow the system, but in fact he's doing all this so that he can uncover information, solve a mystery about a murder, retrieve an ancient weapon. His goal is actually something else. And really, this is so far a book where everybody kind of has secret motivations for what they're doing so far. So we have Viz, and we're in his head, so we know what's going on with him. We have the man who adopts him, who takes him into his family and puts him through this school to represent the family name and what he wants of Viz. And then we have other people who are participating and who are entering into the scene that also have certain plans and expectations. And it's kind of it's kind of a book so far where you don't really know what anybody is about, and everybody is playing a game. It's a very slow-paced book here at the beginning, and what I mean by that is that it takes its time giving you all of the setup, giving you all the background you need on Viz, and giving you all the background on the school. It goes through what people's strategies are, their expectations. There's training sequences that aren't sequences, that are actually you're going through training with him, classroom scenes that we're actually in the classroom answering the questions with him. So it's kind of like, it's a book, if you enjoy books where you're not just following the character through their story, but rather you're living with the character, then this is a good one for that, because it really doesn't, I would say that this is a book that doesn't worry about pacing. This is a book that brings you in and makes you live with the characters and live with everything that's happening and slowly unearth things along with this. I'll also say this is told in first person present tense, which isn't my thing personally. It won't ruin a book for me. It's just not what I would choose. Simply because it just brings us in so close to the main character. I'm so in his head, I'm so in his thoughts, I'm so constantly with him that boy oh boy, I better like him. And I get a little bit tired of a person's voice if I'm spending 600 pages in their head. And this is a character and this is a story that is really, really dependent on strategy, internal strategy. So we're hearing other people's strategies for Viz, but we're also hearing Viz's strategy. So we're going through conversations where in his head he's saying, I allow my voice to quiver a little bit as I speak about this part. I take a deep breath to convey this. He asked me this question, but I can't relay that information, otherwise it'll give this away. But if I don't relay any of it, then it'll make me look suspicious. So what I say is this instead. And so he's a very strategic, he's a very smart character. Great, love following smart characters. He's a very smart character. And he's a very strategic character and he has to think through everything he does, and because we're in his head, because it's first person present tense, we are hearing it all, and that's just not my preference. But that doesn't change the fact that Viz is an interesting character and this is an interesting story and setup that we're getting. So all this to say, I'm not sold yet. I am enjoying myself. I like Viz, I like the world, I like the setup that we've got going on, I like the other characters, and I like how I really don't know who to trust or what to expect out of this so far. But I'm not invested. I'm not sold. I'm not hooked. So those are my first impressions. Slow start, very close start, but also a very interesting story. So I'm looking forward to seeing where it takes us. The Will of the Many is finished. So let's give some background. The Island of the Lost. Nope, that's wrong. The Will of the Lost is also wrong. Shadow of What Was Lost is this author's first trilogy, which it seemed to me was widely loved. And I kind of came in after reading the first book, kind of middle of the road. I liked it, but I didn't love it. I had some problems with it, and I never continued on with the trilogy. I've now read the first book in his second trilogy, which is not connected to the first, at least as far as I could tell. Certainly didn't seem like it. And I liked this one a lot more. I'm for sure continuing on with this trilogy. But I still don't seem to be as hot on it as everybody else. So many people are calling this their favorite book of the year so far, and I definitely don't feel that way, though I did enjoy it quite a bit. I mentioned pacing in it, and I want in the first clip, and I want to be really clear that while yes, pacing is slow for all the reasons that I explained in that first clip, it's also, the plot is constantly moving. There's always something happening, and the plot is being progressed. It's just there's also a lot of living with the characters and thinking with the characters, and it's not some sort of, I don't know, rapidly paced book. It's also a book with a lot of mysteries. It's a really hard book to predict. Even just in the middle of the book, I'm still like, where are we going though? What are we, how is it? And it's not because it feels directionless, it's because there's constantly things being revealed and it's so reliant on mysteries that it's really hard to have proper expectations for where it's going. But it was really fun to constantly, I wasn't even really trying to figure out what would come next. I wasn't even trying to predict things because it felt so unpredictable, and I really liked that about it. I don't know if this is a really bad comparison. You can tell me if you agree with me or not, but I read the Book That Wouldn't Burn earlier this year, like a month ago, and I feel like this is almost comparable as far as the pacing, as far as the mystery element. Even though the plots are completely different, I feel like people that loved that book would love this book too. It is a school setting. Some people love that, some people hate it. I really enjoy a school setting, but that in and of itself won't make a book for me. But I think it was a good school setting. I don't necessarily think that it was like the best school setting I've ever read, but I think it was good and I liked it. And it was also really great to see relationships form in this very complicated situation that our main character is in. It was really good to see him also create relationships with people, which only added to the complications of his situation. I don't know, I think just on a technical level, this book really did everything right. It was very good, it was very well written. I think that the pacing wasn't bad, it was just on the slower side. I think that the plot moved really well, the mysteries were really good, the reveals were really good. It kind of just did everything right. I just don't know if I love this author as much as all my friends do. Like, I don't know that I connect with his stories on the same level, but I still had a good time. I want to be really clear. I still had a really good time with this book. And I will be continuing on with the sequel, but I'm not blown away on the level that a lot of people seem to be. So anyway, let's wrap this vlog up real quick. So I would say my favorite book of this new release vlog was Secret Project. Then The Will of the Many was next. And You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight was a book with a lot of potential that did deliver for the most part, but then the epilogue happened and I'm bitter about that epilogue. I hope you enjoyed this video. I post reading vlogs every week on my review channel, so you should check that out if you happen to like reading vlogs. It's always linked in the description of my videos. I post videos every Monday and Friday on this channel, Tuesdays and Thursdays on my review channel. Let me know what you think about these books if you've read them. I'll see you again soon. Bye.